serious. Again, you've got a well-developed circulation there that is now just south of Calhoun and moving towards the northeast and towards Etowah. So please do take this very seriously. Now, southwest of that, this is in northwestern Georgia, Chattooga County under warning until 12:15. Not seeing very much of a tornado threat here. There's a leading edge of some strong wind that's coming through right now. So primarily what we've got here is a damaging wind threat. That's not to say that it won't morph into something more than that, but at least for now what we're looking at is a damaging wind threat coming up towards Suttles Mill and Mill Creek. Now down into parts of South Alabama right now, at least for the time being, we've got primarily a damaging wind threat, but a very serious one. Taga and Elmore counties under warning right now. That is also the case for areas south of Montgomery, Lowndes and Montgomery County under warning. And I want to show you some of the velocities that are showing up here. They're just about coming into Montgomery right now. This is actually not very far away from the radar. Sometimes when you're shooting up pretty high, you don't have as good of a sense of what kind of wind is coming in. But in this case, because we're so close to the radar, we can really say, yes, you're going to be getting some wind that is easily over 60 miles per hour. That is knocking on the door now in Montgomery. So heads up for some damaging wind coming through easily enough to bring down some tree limbs and some power lines. So, you know, a big part of what is driving this threat is, as I mentioned, the really strong wind fields, the low-level jet, as we call it. And these are winds over 60 miles per hour in blue at about a mile off the ground, and then you've got the surface winds as well coming out of the south. So we've got some turning of the winds, but also the winds getting much faster as you go up not very high into the atmosphere. And that does a couple of things to create some vorticity in the atmosphere. That helps to get the low-level part of the storm rotating, and that's a part of the development of a tornado. That's the early part of the process. And then also it just feeds very strong wind into these storms, and so you can also have just a lot of very strong straight-line wind. So another part of this also is the instability. We've got more than enough of that. In red, you see the fuel for these thunderstorms. We've got plenty of that going forward. And again, as I mentioned, that's going to be the case right into tomorrow morning. So here's a model forecast along with that low-level jet. I want you to notice how this makes its way into Atlanta. So we're talking about around 1 to 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, these strong storms coming through with that really strong low-level jet. So at a minimum, we're going to be looking at a damaging wind threat, but perhaps a whole series of tornado warnings as well. So it's really, really important that if you're not going to stay up, that you've got some way to know what's going on. The best way to do that for most people is going to be to have your phone turned on, not on airplane mode. Make sure that you've got it in alert mode, and it will wake you up most likely as storms are coming through if you can't stay up. But we've got a really serious threat, as I mentioned, that'll go through the overnight and then start to come into the Carolinas into very early tomorrow morning and continue through a lot of eastern Georgia as well. Leon, over to you.
All right, well, let's take you live now to Atlanta, where you can see the rain is picking up, but we've also had some lightning strikes that, I mean, this is a lightning that's coming in ahead of that main line of storms. Right now, this is kind of the calm before the storm. We are still about 50, 75 miles away from the main event that's working its way eastward. All right, take a look at the radar at the moment. We do have Atlanta, some light rain picking up ahead of that main push. Plenty of warnings and lightning, but we're even looking at, even in this lighter rain, we're still looking at some lingering lightning bolts that are popping up. So again, never go outside when you have lightning in the area and those rumbles of thunder are really picking up. We also have some wind conditions that are picking up. This is a severe thunderstorm warning, actually a little bit farther west of here. This is just north of Carrollton. We have that severe thunderstorm warning in effect until 1 a.m. Eastern time, 60+ mile-per-hour winds, plenty of lightning. We also have to be careful about the threat for flash flooding. We've already had issues just across northern Georgia with swift water rescues happening, as well as homes being flooded in some parts, even into parts of Alabama. So if we time out the threats, it's really going to be the overnight hours. So we're talking about through about 3, 4, 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, where this whole line is going to be working its way into Atlanta. Kennesaw around 1 a.m. Villarica at 1 a.m. as well. Atlanta still looking at that slow motion pushing through about 2, 3 a.m. Again, even ahead of that main line, you need to make sure you have that safe zone to get to very fast. We're still looking at impacts over towards you in Athens as we get into closer to 4 or 5 a.m. And then behind it, we could have some sporadic showers still lingering even behind this. I mean, it's already working its way through the area. Parts of I-20 will be impacted, as well as parts of 285. And of course, as we even get even farther east, this threat will start threatening parts of the Carolina coast, as well as other locations. Even the Florida Panhandle, we have to be concerned with that as well. So I mentioned one of the threats, the flood threat, Mark, and you're going to be covering that. And we have that threat lingering all the way into tomorrow morning as well.
Yeah, while it takes so long to get these storms through some of these cities, does not mean that you'll have no precip until the threat goes through. You're going to have hours of very heavy rain with the embedded severe weather. So that also really increases the flood threat potential. Tonight, when you have that yellow color on a map and an overnight, that is a bad setup. It means it is a likelihood that we will have some flash flooding. Plus, it's dark out, so you won't be able to see how much water is on top of those roads. And then you add the severe weather component as well. The bottom line is that we want you in your safe spot, monitoring the weather and staying there through the night. Do not be out and about unless you absolutely have to be. That's a little bit easier now that we have basically shelter-in-place notices through most of the nation at this point. So let's hope that you're in a safe spot and you stay there through the night. What this doesn't talk about is what you do when you have both flash flood warnings and tornado warnings at the same time, because some of you have seen that already today. When that happens, you have to go to the lowest dry level that you have. We never want you going down into a basement that also has water in it. So keep that in mind. If you have tornadoes coming your way and there's already flooding in your area, the lowest dry level is the one you should be in. Flash flood watch is already issued. Now, we can start kind of sort of cutting back this area off towards the west. That back edge has come through places like Memphis. You're not going to see too much more rain. So if you haven't seen flooding already, chances are you won't. But we're just beginning across portions of northern Alabama, northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina. That flood threat is really just starting. So we've got this conveyor belt, all this rain. Yes, that is where we have the severe weather built in. It's hard to think about flash flooding as being, as problematic as the tornado warnings. They're on different scales, but we lose more people to flooding on any given year than we do to tornadoes. There are some exceptions to that rule, of course, in huge tornado outbreaks, but don't discount the flood threat tonight. What you're looking at here are the flood advisories as well as the flash flood warnings, and you can really feel where that corridor was earlier tonight. That line that I drew and then areas just north and west from there had all kinds of rain, significant rainfall rates, 1 to 2 inch per hour type rainfall rates. Now that line has bent just a little bit and it's more like this, and so it's moving on. So that's the good news. The bad news is that it's going into new communities that haven't seen the rain yet, and so you're not, thinking about that flash flood component. Atlanta, we're hearing rumbles of thunder here in the studio. This is just starting for you. You have hours to go before that threat is all the way through, both with the severe weather component, the embedded tornadoes, the wind, and with a potential flood threat. Let's zoom in here towards the Birmingham area, still under a flash flood warning until 1:30. Mostly just residual rains. It takes a bit to let that rain leave an area after the water comes up as high as it did, especially in those paved over areas. The underpasses hold that water just a little bit longer. You look at how much rain fell in the past 6 hours, and when you see these kind of yellow or even orange colors, that's in that 3 to 5 to 8 range. So that's a significant amount of rain in a 6-hour time frame. That's again 1 inch per hour rainfall rate for a significant portion of the time. And when you look at the storm reports within here, all these the icons that you're seeing, those are different reports that have come into the National Weather Service about water issues, whether they're like over the road, like along Highway 160, several inches of water on the road, or if they were to say approach people's homes in Dalton, several reports of flooded roadways in the city of Dalton, Georgia. Keep in mind, there have been severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings after that flood report came in. So again, we're looking at all the modes of severe weather tonight, including that flash flood threat. There are indeed overlapping tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, and flash flood warnings in that southern Tennessee to North Georgia corridor. And we're just now getting into the rest of that line, which is pointed at the rest of the I-20 corridor, the I-85 and I-75 corridor. Atlanta, get ready. This stuff is headed towards you. Montgomery, it's in the city right now with regards to the heaviest rain, the flood potential, and the wind. That's where you're seeing severe thunderstorm warnings. And so this whole area has all the threats of severe weather, and that's why we are here with you right on through the night to monitor everything that is going on. Liana, this is a threat that's not only happening tonight, but we're going to watch this continue through the overnight into early tomorrow. And people don't usually associate the morning with severe weather, including tornadoes, but we could have that tomorrow.
Exactly. I mean, we have torcons in place covering the Carolina coastline even, and it's going to be the wee hours of tomorrow morning. Well, this morning, really, especially if you're in the East Coast. It's already midnight right now, so we're talking about 3, 4, 5 a.m. time period. Take a look tomorrow, Raleigh, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, all at torcons of 5. Not as high as the 7 that we've been experiencing overnight tonight just to the west of here, but still pretty darn high as well. That's going to be impacting a good chunk of the coast, even getting up to Richmond as well. But we do have torcons of 3 clipping parts of the northern tip of the Florida Panhandle, and 2s in those yellow zones right here. So Tallahassee, you're in that torcon of 3 danger zone. So not only are we concerned with the threat for tornadoes, it's also the threat for damaging winds, lightning, and flash flooding. That severe threat continues through tomorrow morning, actually over the next several hours really, into early Monday morning. So this is about now. We're watching that line work its way through North Georgia, still working its way through southern Alabama, clipping the Florida Panhandle. This is about 4, 5, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. The good news is not many people will likely be on the roads for Monday morning. Everyone's sheltering in place due to social distancing and the pandemic. But hey, I mean, that could actually potentially even save lives because so many people will be at home and not out and about traveling. This is about 8 a.m. where it's rumbling through Savannah, Tallahassee. So really through about midday, that's where we're still watching this dangerous threat, reaching the coast up towards Richmond by about 10, 11, around your lunchtime. And then it's early afternoon hours where we're all behind it and it's heading even farther east. Tomorrow, though, the threat for damaging winds is definitely there. We're talking about 60+ mile-per-hour winds possible and likely everywhere in the dark blue. Savannah, Raleigh, Wilmington, getting clipped for you, Columbia and Richmond. Baltimore, you have that possibility as well as you in Tallahassee. And Mark was talking about the threat for flash flooding. We still have that threat lingering into the morning hours of Monday as well. For tomorrow morning through Tuesday morning, we're looking at now this threat pushing a little bit farther north. Now we're in New England and parts of the mid-Atlantic, New York, Hartford, Boston. Heads up for you.
Hey, can I
Hold on.
With all new episodes of Highway Through Hell at 8 and Heavy Rescue at 9, Monday night on the Weather Channel.
A wind advisory is in effect. Currently in our area, 69 degrees with showers in the area. Overnight, windy, strong to severe thunderstorms, low 64. Monday, mainly clear and windy, high 77. Higher wind gusts possible. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Welcome back to our ongoing coverage of severe weather. It's been a really active night. We've gotten a lot of reports of tornadoes and significant damage from some of these tornadoes, especially earlier this evening and in the afternoon. And right now there is still one tornado warning to tell you about. We are seeing a little bit of a lull in terms of tornado warnings. Many severe thunderstorm warnings though, and there's a really significant damaging wind threat. Both of those threats will continue right through the overnight, right into tomorrow morning as well. Let's take you up into southeastern Tennessee and show you the latest on this tornado warning. That is McMinn County under warning right now. We've been watching the storm that had a really well-defined debris signature on it southwest of Cleveland as it was just south of I-75. Right now seeing a sort of a broader area of shear there, so it does not appear to be as concentrated as it once was coming up towards Etowah. Let's just go ahead and time it out to be on the safe side, but it does appear to be a little bit bit less threatening relative to what we were watching earlier. That coming towards Etowah and Arden and also into Madisonville. Then to the south of that, we're starting to see storms lean over into northwest Georgia and just starting to get into the Atlanta metro. That is Bartow and Floyd and Polk counties under warning until 1 a.m. A very fast motion on these cells. They are generally moving at about 50 to 55 miles per hour. In this case, yes, 55 miles per hour. So I'm going to time this out for you so you can get a sense of when this is going to come in. And, you know, right now you've got a line of storms, and primarily along with that line, what we're looking at is a damaging wind threat, but we certainly could be looking at some circulations developing within the line, some supercells developing within the line, and that could bring us a tornado threat as well. We entirely do expect to see tornado warnings through the Atlanta metro overnight tonight. So these storms coming into Cedartown more immediately, then coming up towards Cartersville about 1 o'clock in the morning, Canton at about 1:14. You see the far edge of that track there around 1:14, also around the time when it's going to be coming into Marietta as well. So, you know, at a minimum, we're likely going to be looking at a damaging wind threat, a lot of very heavy rain, quite a bit of lightning. Here, by the way, is a brand new scan. I'm going to do this one more time and actually widen it out a little bit to give you a better sense of how this is going to come in. And you know, at a minimum, as I mentioned, damaging wind, a lot of lightning, some very heavy rain. We could be talking about a flash flood threat. But on top of that, there could also be a tornado threat coming into this area. So Ackworth about 1 o'clock in the morning, Marietta at about 1:17 or so as all of this moves in. And we certainly do want you to be on your toes as this overspreads the Atlanta metro. There is now a tornado watch in effect for Atlanta, as well as much of central Georgia, and that is going until 6 o'clock in the morning. It's going to take some time for the entire metro to see all these storms roll through. Now down into South Alabama, looking at some severe warnings here for 60-mile-per-hour wind, down into the Montgomery area as well. Also a brand new warning just south and east of that, and that is from Tallahassee down towards Union Springs, Bullock, and Macon and Montgomery counties under warning. We've been looking at some really amazing wind. And, you know, the thing about this is when you've got wind that's coming right towards the radar, down the radial, as we say, and it's not far from the radar, and in this case it is not far at all from the radar. It's probably just a matter of tens of miles from the radar. There's the radar site right there, and there you go, 15 miles away from the radar. You've got a really good sense, you've got a really good look at how much wind is coming in, and that's 72-mile-per-hour wind. So get ready for a vicious storm to come in here, and that's going to be moving towards Tallahassee and also towards Shorter as well, moving into Tysonville more immediately, and Shorter at about 11:30 or so. Very serious damaging wind threat as that comes through. So again, as I mentioned, it's going to be a long night tonight. Let's get more on the tracking from Mark now.
Yeah, you know, Carl, you mentioned that wind is a big part of the story. We may be seeing some of the tornado threat, you know, as it goes through its ebbs and flows. Hopefully this is a lasting downturn, as we don't have any active tornado warnings at the moment, but we've got all kinds of severe thunderstorm warnings for very strong winds. That includes the Atlanta area. You're looking live here at Atlanta, and we are going to continue to see a very robust pattern, a favorable pattern for very strong straight line winds. More than enough wind to bring down trees. All the trees across the south have opened up. All those leaves act like little parachutes and catch the wind. But maybe more importantly, most of those trees, most might be an overstatement, but many of the trees also still have their flowers on, so they're weighted down, right? There's lots of weight on that top side of the lever that the tree becomes. I expect a lot of tree damage as we go through the rest of the night, not only in Atlanta, but through much of central and southeastern portions of Alabama into central and southern Georgia, where these big clusters of thunderstorms move into. They're going to be bringing those very strong winds with them. We've already seen some significant reports of wind already today from East Texas into much of Arkansas. The new query on this, 175 different reports of wind damage through today. And I think this number is going to increase. This doesn't have anything yet in that corridor that's still raining and thunderstorming now, that Atlanta to Montgomery corridor. What you saw back in this area from, you know, Huntsville and Birmingham back towards that Mississippi border, that's going to shift into the area where this slow-moving thunderstorms are right now. Here's a look at some of those current wind gusts, and we're still in the southerly flow. You look at Atlanta, your temperatures have climbed into the 70s. You were stuck in the low 60s with rain all day. Now it's sultry out there as these storms are arriving, with winds gusting over 30. Same with Macon. So that's what these storms are tapping into, and it's why we have widespread wind advisories in the south and even some high wind warnings to the north.
At Papa John's,
Time for investing to feel individual.
Welcome back to our ongoing coverage of severe weather. We are seeing a relative lull right now, at least in terms of tornado warnings. Still a lot of severe thunderstorm warnings out there and a lot of potential for very strong straight line wind. And by no means is the tornado threat over. In fact, there is a new tornado watch that has been issued for the entire central and northern part of state of Georgia, including Atlanta. That is going until 6 o'clock in the morning. This tornado threat and damaging wind threat will continue through the overnight, even into tomorrow morning. But at least for now, we've got, as I mentioned, a relative lull in the tornado concern. And let's take a look at where some of these severe thunderstorm warnings are. We're starting to see that coming into the Atlanta metro. There's a severe warning in effect for Cherokee and Cleburne in eastern parts of Alabama, but then also into Bartow and Floyd and Polk counties going until 1 o'clock in the morning. And with this warning, we've got potential for some 60-mile-per-hour wind. I want you to also notice, look at the structure here. So you see a mostly linear system here. And so when you've got a linear convective system, you've got a damaging wind threat. But then right in there, there's a little curlicue on the north end of that. So that's precisely what we expect to see coming across the Atlanta metro tonight. These storms that are mostly linear, but then some of them are supercells. They've got some rotating segments in them. And as that happens, there could very well be tornado warnings across the Atlanta metro tonight. And as I mentioned, these are moving very quickly, about 55 miles per hour in this case. So timing this out as we look at the worst part of that storm, as that continues off to the northeast, that'll be coming into Cartersville near the top of the hour, 1:15 getting into Canton, and about 1:21 coming into Marietta. So as that happens, at a minimum, we're going to be looking at a damaging wind threat. We're going to be looking at some very heavy rain, but possibly some embedded circulations within this as well. There certainly could be some tornado warnings across the region. And as I mentioned, tornado watch for the Atlanta metro going until 6 o'clock in the morning. Mark?
Yeah, Carl, already a very dangerous day. Throughout the afternoon and early evening, we had several storms that came through Mississippi with tornadoes. I want to show you a quick radar recap. Look at these two supercells that came through, one right on the heels of the other along the path. All those red symbols you're seeing are reports of tornadoes. Now, again, these kind of overlap each other, so at some point it's hard to tell which one produced which. But again, two different tornado producing supercells that worked their way through the area, including near Laurel, Mississippi. Both of these right about that 4 to 5 o'clock time frame, with a very clear signature on the radar, a very wrapped up classic view of that signature using the Doppler radar system. And unfortunately, this did result in tornadoes and in damage. We want to get an update now from Dana Baumgartner, PIO with Jackson County there in Mississippi. Jones County there in Mississippi. Dana, thanks for talking with us again.
Yes, thank you for having me.
A very difficult night. We heard from you earlier today. What have you learned over the past couple of hours as you went through the town? How is the town doing? What new information do you have now?
We've just passed through Soso, Mississippi, and Soso got hit very, very hard. The fire department there is essentially demolished. Several businesses there are pretty much gone or severely damaged. As of right now, we had 2 fire districts that were impacted, and in one district, we had about 40 calls come in just in one district. So we're anticipating a number of calls for help to be somewhere around 50, but we'll have confirmation of that later. Several miles worth of damage that really mainly got homes, but there, like I said, were a couple of businesses in Soso that got damaged heavily.
And with, you know, so many people at home because of the holidays and because of the pandemic going on, what are the stats on injuries or deaths in your area?
We had multiple calls for emergency medical assistance. We do have one confirmed fatality. We do have one individual who's missing. And outside of that, just lots of injuries. People were trapped and thrown from their home or you know, wherever they were at in the path of this storm, in the path of this tornado. So it's been a lot of injury and at least one fatality.
Well, let's hope that number stays at 1 and that the injuries are not too bad. That is Dana Baumgartner with Jones County, Mississippi. Includes the town of Laurel and the Soso area as well. Take it easy tonight. I know it's going to be a tough one, and we're all staying with you. We're here through the night to make sure you stay ahead of any new storms that are coming your way throughout the South. Tornado watches continue until the morning.
Service. Better pizza, better than a sandwich. Papa John's.
Welcome back as we continue our coverage here at the Weather Channel. Check this out from Morgan County, Alabama. Pouring rain, but maybe more importantly, look at the water crossing over the roadway there. Without the bright lights from the, it looks like a police cruiser here because we've got the blue and reds flashing and illuminating the raindrops. You wouldn't see that at all. My goodness, that is a lot of water. Flowing water is so powerful. It only takes about 6 inches of flowing water to knock a grown person off their feet and 1 or 2 feet, depending on the vehicle, to float that vehicle away. Much lower than most people think would be required to float a vehicle away. And so keep that in mind tonight. The flood threat remains high, especially into North Georgia, where it's been raining just about all afternoon and evening, and there's now maybe, you could argue, the heaviest of the rain moving into North Georgia right now. Let's go back into the lab. I want to bring in storm specialist Carl Parker. Carl, in North Georgia, several severe thunderstorm warnings, maybe with some chance of rotation there as well.
Yeah, we are seeing a little bit of rotation showing up right now, but nothing that has warranted a tornado warning. We certainly could be looking at some tornado warnings across North Georgia and the Atlanta metro through tonight. At least for now, it is just severe thunderstorm warnings. And let's take a look at what's going on the radar picture. We'll take you first of all into areas of northwest Georgia near Rome, where there is now a severe thunderstorm warning in effect. Now, I want you to notice the shape of this line, this linear convective system. Mostly with a line of storms, you're going to have a damaging wind threat, but you do have this sort of a broad circulation showing up right in there. So that's the type of thing that we're going to be watching out for tonight. Some embedded supercells within these lines of storms as they come through. But one thing that is somewhat encouraging is that you've got a lot of rain out ahead of all of this, and so it is a little bit harder to get higher instability in a case like that. Temperatures right now at about 70 in these areas where you've got all that rain coming through. If you'd had no rain and a line of storms coming through, well, then you'd be more concerned about the possibility of stronger updrafts and stronger storms. But with all this rain out here, that may help to mitigate things somewhat. Nonetheless, you've still got a very energetic system, a really strong parent storm, very strong wind fields, and so it's not going to take that much. We certainly could be looking at a serious damaging wind threat all across the metro, and in addition to that, there could be some spin-outs, some little kinks that develop within the lines here, and that can get just strong enough for a short period of time to bring us a tornado threat. So by no means do I want folks to let their guard down. Just letting you know that as we're seeing all this rain, that is cautiously encouraging in terms of the level of threat that we're going to be looking at tonight. Now let's track this out and see how quickly this is going to be moving in. These storms have really been hightailing it. They've been moving at about 50, 55 miles per hour. So that takes the storms into Ackworth at about near the top of the hour, Canton at about 108, and then Marietta at about 121 or so, with at a minimum a damaging wind threat and probably a pretty serious damaging wind threat because there's so much wind in the atmosphere in general, because you've got such a strong parent storm with very strong wind fields, and so that is feeding wind energy into the backs of these storms. It can very easily transfer that down to the ground. So that's the least that we're going to be looking at as a damaging wind threat, and enough wind to bring down trees and power lines. It could very well be that a lot of folks actually lose their power tonight. And again, there could be some spin-ups that develop within this line as well. So certainly we want folks to be on their toes because it is such an energetic system. And there is a tornado watch going until 6 o'clock in the morning. It's going to take some time for this line of storms to come all across the metro in North Georgia. Farther south, looking at some severe thunderstorm warnings now right along that 65 corridor. Warning now for Bullock and Macon and Montgomery County. Then another one off to the west of Columbus, that for Lee and Russell County. So a damaging wind threat in these areas. So what we've got here is our future radar along with those strong low-level winds that help to generate the damaging wind potential and begin the process of getting storms rotating to also help to contribute to that tornado potential. So we've still got these exceptionally strong low-level winds along with the line coming through. There you see that is about 2 o'clock in the morning Atlanta time. Here we go into 4 o'clock in the morning Atlanta time, and it's still starting to, it's moving just across the eastern part of the suburbs there, and then also coming into North Carolina as well. So we very well could be looking at warnings right into tomorrow morning in parts of the Carolinas and parts of South and East Georgia and also northern Florida. Really energetic storm, and it's going to be going strong all night long. Leon, over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Carl. And of course, that threat continues to extend in towards the Carolinas as we get into the next several hours. This is early Monday morning. We're talking torcons of 5 in place for Raleigh, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. Now, that's not the highest as far as what we've been seeing over the past 24 hours, but it's still pretty darn high. It's not 0. That's what you need to take away. So there's that torcon of 5 hugging the coast, Richmond, Raleigh, Wilmington, down towards Savannah, all included in that. We also have torcons of 3 clipping parts of the Florida Panhandle, as well as up towards the mid-Atlantic. Baltimore, you're in that torcon of 3 and torcons of 2 just outside in those yellow zones, even clipping parts of central and northern Florida as well. So not only are we concerned with the possibility for tornadoes, it's also the damaging wind threat. We're talking 60+ mile-per-hour winds, plenty of lightning, and we can't rule out the chance for flash flooding. Likely in that red zone, but really it's going to be through about 6, 7, 8 a.m. that we're going to start seeing this threat reach you. So as we start the clock around now, 1 a.m. Eastern time, there's that line that's working its way through North Georgia. It continues to spread in towards the Carolinas as we get into 4, 5, 6 a.m. this morning. So this is Monday morning we're talking about. I think the saving grace in all of this is the fact that so many people will be home, sheltered in place. Not many people on the roads, and that's a good thing because this is going to be working through what would be prime commute times, 8 a.m. It's swinging through the Outer Banks through midday, right around your lunch hour, but by about 1, 2 p.m., that's when it's all said and done and it is out over the ocean. So mariners, beware. Tomorrow, the damaging wind threat is expected to hug the coast, likely to see this zone of 60+ mile-per-hour winds. And of course, we also have the chance for severe thunderstorms possible. Once again, as we get into Tuesday, no torcons as of yet, but again, we're still in this very active period.
It's a challenging.
Wake up watching AMHQ. Weekday mornings on the Weather Channel.
A wind advisory is in effect. Currently in our area, 70 degrees under cloudy skies. Overnight, windy, strong to severe thunderstorms, low 64. Monday, mainly clear and windy, high 77. Higher wind gusts possible. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Our coverage continues right here on the Weather Channel. We want to show you what happened earlier today in Laurel, Mississippi. Our storm tracker, Charles Peak, was kind of fighting his way through portions of Jones County there in Mississippi, along with the first responders. Roads were completely covered by tree debris, and they had to basically chainsaw their way in. Several homes, as you saw demolished. Well-constructed home here, garage of some kind, that whole exterior wall leaning. And then look at this, roof gone, walls that have fallen, cinder blocks everywhere. This is structure after structure after structure with significant damage. Full construction, full, livability type damage. And then you've got the power lines down, huge trees slicing through the debris. So you have to wonder what was falling first. Was the house breaking? Was the tree coming down first? Who knows when you see a setup like this, especially in the dark. Real tough to get your bearings, and this is the kind of stuff that the National Weather Service will be out surveying to determine just how strong these storms were. Liana, pretty clear indicator by the technology, by the radar side of things, that these were tornadoes that came through, and probably two different ones that came through Jones County in Mississippi.
Yeah, we have so many impacts and threats as we continue through this evening and really into this morning. New video showing the other threat from all these storms, flooding. This is new video into us from Jefferson County, Alabama. Look at all that rain that's coming down. It's coming down over a super saturated environment. The south, we've seen 2 feet in some spots of rain already this year. So the soil can't hold that much more, and that's why we're seeing so many roads flooded. We've already had reports of swift water rescues being reported all across parts of Alabama, even North Georgia, seeing some of the homes flooded and roads completely flooded through the area. So I think the saving grace in all of this is the fact that so many people are sheltered in place, staying at home, not out on the roads. But if you do and must need to travel, make sure you steer clear of any kind of flooded roadways. You do not want to be driving through these and putting yourself in danger, as well as any first responders. But of course, this is just one of the threats that we're tracking as we continue to cover this enormous threat across the South. Let's send it out into the lab with Carl Parker on the latest with these alerts.
Yeah, Liana, we've got an ongoing damaging wind threat, and certainly there could be some tornadoes as well. We are seeing a relative lull right now in the tornado threat. That doesn't mean that it's over, by no means. You've still got very strong wind fields in the atmosphere, strong low-level winds, strong upper-level winds, a really vigorous parent feature, all of those things pointing to an ongoing threat for tornadoes in addition to damaging wind. But again, right now, we don't have any tornado warnings. So let's take a look at where the action is. And storms are now leaning across the northern part of Georgia. It was a really busy night earlier tonight in North Georgia. We've got some reports of really significant damage in North Georgia, unfortunately. Right now, though, we're looking at a damaging wind threat coming across 75. Bartow, Floyd, and Polk counties under warning until 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, one thing that I find to be at least cautiously encouraging is the fact that you've got a lot of rain coming through right now. Temperatures in the far northern exurbs in the upper 60s to near 70 in the northern suburbs. So, it's not incredibly warm. If you've got, no rain and a line of storms coming through, well, then look out, because that means you're really maximizing the instability, which is tough to do at this time of the night. But then when you've got all this rain out ahead of this line, that may help to mitigate the strength of these storms somewhat. That said, we certainly have seen rotating storms in Alabama tonight with all kinds of rain around, and you've just got really, really strong wind fields. So by no means are we ruling out some rotating storms coming across the Atlanta metro. But at least for now, it appears to be mostly a damaging wind threat. We'll see how that evolves over the next couple of hours here. And our coverage, by the way, is going to continue right through the night. So here you see the leading edge of these stronger storms. I'm going to track these forward. They're moving very quickly. That's a big part of what we have seen tonight, very fast motion. We don't have warnings extending this far to the east, but I'm tracking it out just to give you a sense in the Atlanta area of when this is going to be coming in. So moving into Canton around 113, coming into Marietta at about 123, and Smyrna at about 125 or so. So at a minimum, we're probably going to see a damaging wind threat, again, because you've got really strong wind fields, a lot of strong wind in the low levels of the atmosphere. So the storms actually don't have to have really strong updrafts to tap into that. They can be relatively modest storms and still bring a lot of that very strong wind down to the ground. So that's going to be one thing we're watching for, but we may see some spin up, some little circulations developing within the line as it comes across the Atlanta metro, and that's going to be from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, and there is a tornado watch in effect until 6 o'clock in the morning for much of central Georgia, including Atlanta. Now, farther south, looking at a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings here, east of Montgomery. One of those in effect for Bullock and Macon and Tallapoosa counties. Another one just west of Columbus, Georgia. That is Lee and Russell counties under warning until 12:45 in the morning. So, looking at the model forecast, along with those very strong low-level winds, which again fuel the damaging wind threat, but can also contribute to the formation of rotating storms, that's going to be coming through the Atlanta area 2 to 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning with those really strong winds aloft, and then it's going to be making its way into the Carolinas and central Georgia, and we may very well be looking at a severe threat all through that time. And we're going to continue our coverage right here on the Weather Channel. We'll be with you live all night and right into the morning. Stay tuned.